Today I'm out here in North Carolina taking a look at the all-new 5th generation Subaru Forester. Back in its first generation, the Subaru Forester was really one of the first crossovers in America, giving us off-road ability that you'd normally associate with a truck-based vehicle, with the practicalities and handling ability that you'd associate with more of a traditional vehicle. That original Forester also looked like a blend of sedan or station wagon meets SUV, and that look has continued with this generation of the Forester. We have this long, more sedan-like hood up front versus what we see in some of the other crossovers, and definitely a tall greenhouse in the back, and overall squarer proportions than we see in many crossovers. Up front, this generation of the Forester definitely looks like one of the family. We have the same basic grille design that we see on the rest of the Subaru lineup, a very upright and handsome, attractive look. LED headlamps are standard in all models, but because we're driving the top-end touring trim right now, we get headlamps that steer in the corners as well as LED fog lamps below. Behind the windscreen, we find a standard twin camera system, and that's because Subaru's EyeSight system is now standard on all models of the Forester. Subaru uses the twin camera system to give us many of the same active safety features that we see in the Toyota Safety Sense package or Honda Sensing, and it comes in all versions of the Forester, even the base model. That includes adaptive cruise control functionality, autonomous braking, and lane keeping assistance. Subaru tells us that the dual camera system is a little bit less expensive to repair in the event of an accident because obviously nothing is right up there on the front bumper that you'd have to replace. It also is a little bit less expensive logically than some of those radar systems. In terms of overall length, this generation of the Forester has grown just a tiny bit versus the last generation. This is now 182.1 inches long, but it retains a lot of the things that Subaru owners have loved about the Forester. We still have 8.7 inches of ground clearance, which is class leading, especially for base models. We have a very vertical rear hatch, which helps improve cargo practicality. A lot of glass on the side, giving excellent vision not only for the driver, but also for people that are a little shorter or kids that may be sitting in the back. And extra windows back here to make the cabin feel a little bit bigger and a little bit airier. This is also still very square overall, as you'll notice in the profile, and that really helps improve practicality on the inside. The overall squareness of the Forester really is the key to its practicality, and I'm not just talking about the squareness of this rear end right here, also the fact that the roofline and this bottom of the vehicle really are very close to one another vertically. It doesn't really round in a lot like some of the other crossovers out there, and that really helps improve interior practicality, especially headroom and shoulder room. Out back, we have combination lamp modules, so we have LEDs up here, and then we have incandescent bulbs for the turn signal and the backup light. From this angle, you can see that the Forester is still a little bit narrower than the competition, and you can also really see how square the overall side profile is. While we're back here, I'll also point out that the tail lamp modules that are on the body are very, very narrow, and that's because Subaru was really dedicated to giving us a very wide and practical cargo opening back here, and you can really see that when you lift the hatch. Also new for 2019 is a sport trim of the Forester. We have some exterior differences right here, like the orange stripe right there on the front and the orange stripe on the side, blacked out wheels. Now remember that sport for Subaru means something different than other manufacturers, so we don't find any extra power under the hood. Instead, this actually seems to be more focused on off-road ability. The Sport is the first model in the lineup to get their new two-mode X-mode system. That sounds a little bit odd, but X-mode is what Subaru calls their all-wheel drive off-road mode. And in the past, that mode was designed mainly for loose or slippery surfaces, but not surfaces where you really needed a lot of wheel spin in order to actually help get you out of a sticky situation. So we now have that in these two drive modes that you'll see on the inside. We also get slightly different roof rails right here. You can see that they're orange trimmed. And Subaru tells us that because the Forester is one of the entries in this segment that is more designed for off-roading, sort of like the Jeep Cherokee, this is the first vehicle in the segment that was actually designed from the very beginning to accommodate roof tents. So if you're planning on putting one on your compact crossover, know that this is the only one where there's actually a section in the owner's manual that tells you how to do that, and it's the only one rated for that load. The Forester just wouldn't be a Subaru without a box or engine under the hood, so we find their latest four-cylinder design producing 182 horsepower and 176 pound-feet of torque. This is an almost entirely new engine designed to give us better fuel economy and a little bit better performance than the last model. Thanks to the new engine design and an almost entirely new continuously variable transmission, fuel economy is absolutely excellent. It comes in at 33 miles per gallon highway, 29 miles per gallon combined. That's actually right about on par with the leaders in this segment in front-wheel drive form. So this will actually not only beat just about everybody when it comes to all-wheel drive models, this will also beat just about everybody when it comes to their base front-wheel drive models as well. At this point in time, we don't have a turbocharged Forester, so if you were hoping to get one of those, you may have to wait and see if Subaru releases one later. Towing capacity comes in at 1,500 pounds for all versions when properly equipped. Thanks to the very square side profile, the Forester has always done well when it comes to headroom, but that's especially true for 2019 when a lot of the competitive models have gone for sleeker side profiles and really cut down on headroom both front and rear. Sitting right here up front very comfortably for myself, I have about 3 inches of headroom left, and we are in the model with the panoramic sunroof. This is definitely more room than you'll find in a Tiguan or a Tucson, which have less headroom. We also have a tilt telescopic steering column, a power driver seat with 2-way adjustable lumbar support, 2-position seat memory right over there on the doors, and the front passenger seat is powered as well. This generation of the Forester also has another trick up its sleeve. It actually has a face monitoring camera right here in the center cluster, very similar to what we see in new iPhone models. It actually recognizes up to 5 drivers and will automatically adjust the seat and mirrors and other vehicle settings to my preferences when I get in. This is really handy if you have multiple different people driving the vehicle, because it'll recognize more people than there would be room to put buttons on the door. It's a really handy feature. The way that it works is pretty simple. I just hop in the car and immediately the system recognizes my face and adjusts things. The display on the car says "Hello Alex" because I've programmed my name into the vehicle. This is a feature that you will only find in the top-end touring model, and it is coupled with a facial recognition algorithm that can sense whether you're distracted or you're getting sleepy, and it will tell you to keep your eyes on the road. So if you're worried about distracted driving, this definitely is going to be an interesting feature for you. Now, one thing I wish the Forester had was a 4-way adjustable lumbar support. I wish the lumbar was a little bit higher on the seat, but overall the seat design is definitely more comfortable than the last model. Thanks to the square profile, rear seat legroom is also very, very generous. I have about 6 inches of legroom left. It's important when looking at vehicles like this to look at combined legroom, not just rear legroom figures. Because if you look at the rear legroom figures, this vehicle would appear to be below some of the competition. But when you look at front row plus second row, then you'll actually see that this is incredibly good for this segment. I also have a lot of headroom back here. Again, we are in the model with the panoramic moonroof, and that does cut headroom down, but I still have about 1.5 inches of headroom left. If I move over to the middle seat, because of the overall shape of the roof, I still have plenty of room. My hair is not touching the ceiling, still have about 1 inch left. All the way over to the right, where the front seat is all the way back in its tracks, and I still have about 3 or 4 inches of room left. These seats do recline. There's a little bit of webbing right here on the side, so I can actually choose a slightly more reclined position right like that, or I can lift these up to be a little bit squarer to give us more cargo room in the back. In addition to reclining, the rear seats also fold in a 60/40 fashion, and they fold completely flat with that cargo area in the rear. Rear passengers also have a center armrest with 2 cup holders right there, and then we have a headrest that's adjustable for that center seat. I wish the cover for these USB charge ports was done in a slightly more elegant manner, but we do have 2 high-power USB charge ports back here, as well as heated seats in the model that we're driving. Behind the rear hatch, we find a large and practical cargo area, one of the larger ones available in this segment at 35.7 cubic feet. But Subaru is telling us that they're also proud of the overall width in this cargo area. It is notably wider between these 2 outer edges than most of the competition, also a little bit wider between the wheel wells, even though overall the Forester is actually on the narrow side. Subaru tells us that this is not only advantageous for luggage like this 22-inch roller bag here that you can see fits very easily under that roller cover right like that, but also for items like golf clubs, which don't have to be put at an angle. They can just be slid right in there across the back. Since we're driving the touring model, we also have some electric releases for those second row seats to help you fold them down a little bit more easily. And again, that is flat with this cargo area in the back, so I can very easily roll luggage right in there onto the backs of the seats. If we lift up the load floor, we find additional storage right there, quite a lot of it actually, and then beneath that we find, of course, a spare tire, as you'd expect from a vehicle with some off-roading in mind. This is a compact spare, it's not a full-size spare, but you may actually be able to fit a full-size spare back there if you wanted to buy one aftermarket. Subaru also gives us enough room under here to store the roller cover. That is another handy feature, because vehicles that have a hard cover or vehicles that don't have a place to put this, it's a little bit more difficult to put large items in the back when you want to, because you'd have to put the roller cover somewhere. This is a really handy spot to keep it. As we look around the interior, keep in mind that we are in the top-end touring trim. So we do have this large panoramic moonroof, which you will find on lower trims as well. It's worth noting that this is not as large as some of the competition. So if we look right back there towards the rear passengers, you'll notice that doesn't go over the rear passengers' heads. It really just more goes just about over their knees. It's also worth noting that the cover is a manual cover. It's not powered like we find in some of the competition. The driver and front passenger have height adjustable shoulder belts and two-way adjustable headrests. Because we're in the top end touring trim, we have this very attractive nut brown leather. The leather is perforated in the center, although these seats are not ventilated, they are just heated. Subaru tells us that one of the things they really wanted to change with this generation of the Forester was to make the overall interior appearance more premium, and that's definitely something they've done. We now have more stitched materials on the dashboard and on the front doors, like you can see right there. All of that brown section is made of stitched pleather. We then have a soft touch injection molded upper section right here on the front of the doors, and then we find hard plastics lower on the doors, just like the competition. That generally helps improve plastic longevity. You'll see down there we have a pretty generously sized bottle holder down there at the bottom, and you can't see it, but we also have a Harman Kardon speaker down there in the corner. The dashboard uses a combination of different materials. We have a soft touch injection molded upper section right there. It is then after stitched to give it the impression of being multiple pieces of material, but it's not actually multiple pieces, as you can see right there. And then below that we have a soft touch section with sort of a golf ball like finish on it. I find that quite attractive. It's basically the same pattern that we see over there on the doors, helping tie everything together. And then we have a stitched insert right down there, a little bit of trim to snazz things up a little bit, just above this bin-style glove compartment. The glove compartment is moderately sized. I was just barely able to fit a 10.5-inch iPad inside. Larger ones might have troubles fitting, but smaller ones shouldn't have a problem. As we see in other Subaru models, we have a driver display right here in the center of the dash. This display gives us things like the status of the vehicle's active safety systems, the climate control settings, clock, outside temperature you can see right there, status of the all-wheel drive system with an inclination sensor. We also get the status of the vehicle's active safety systems in a different display, weather, turn-by-turn navigation directions, Apple CarPlay or Android Auto readouts, trip fuel economy, etc. Interestingly enough, this is also where you would adjust certain vehicle settings rather than these settings being in the center console. So if you want to adjust the driver monitoring system and have it recognize a new driver, that's where you would do that. If you want to adjust the settings on the climate control system, then this is where you would adjust them as well. So if you want the climate control to be a little bit less blowy or eco, or if you want it to blow a little bit more powerfully on you, this is where you would make those adjustments. Below that, the model that we're driving has an 8-inch color touchscreen infotainment system with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. If you get the base model, then we get a 6.5-inch color touchscreen that runs basically the same software. The only real difference between this system and that system is that this system also has factory navigation built into it. This is Subaru's latest infotainment software, and I really love the fact that Apple CarPlay and Android Auto are standard features with the system, because they're still optional on a lot of competitive vehicles. Keyless Go is an option, but our model has that, so we have a start-stop button right there. Dual zone climate control is also optional, although all models do come standard with at least a single zone automatic climate control system. Below that, we have a storage cubby where you can keep your smartphone, 2 USB inputs, auxiliary input right down there, as well as a 12-volt power port. I do wish that the USB was hidden away, but I'm glad that there are 2 of them right there. Behind that, we have a pretty traditional console shifter. Drive is all the way back like that. Manual mode is over to the left. Once the shifter is in manual, you'd actually use the paddle shifters on the back of the steering wheel in order to change gears. Back in the center console, we have an electric parking brake button, auto brake hold in all models. That's another nice feature standard. Heated seats over here on the right side, high and low for both seating positions. And then we find the new X mode dial right here in the middle. This is a little bit different than other Subarus with X mode, because previous generations of X mode were just on or off, and X mode wasn't as handy in situations where a little bit of wheel slip would actually be better for you to help get you out of sticky situations. So that's what we have now. So we have deep snow and mud right over there, and then on this side we have regular snow and dirt, and then we press down for normal. That gives us a little bit more capability than we saw in the last Forester. If we zoom out from there, we find 2 fairly large cup holders right there behind that area, and then a softly padded center armrest that opens to reveal a moderately sized storage cubby. Because of the overall vehicle design, we don't find quite as much room in the storage compartment as we do in some of the competition. And then there's a small storage area right there in front where you can put things like the key for the car. The instrument cluster is somewhat similar to what we see in other Subaru models. We have a tachometer and a speedometer, and in the middle we have a color multifunction display. This color display gives us readouts that are somewhat similar to what we saw in the center console, but then also different displays as well. So you can see we have our average fuel economy here, and then an MPG bar along the top to tell you whether your average is increasing or decreasing. Moving out from there, we find basically the same steering wheel as other Subaru models. Again, those paddle shifters on the back of the steering wheel, down on the left and up over there on the right. The buttons on the steering wheel take a little bit of explanation. So over here on this side, we have source, volume up, down, track forward, backward, and then this info button actually cycles through options right there on that display in the center of the entire dashboard, like you can see right there. We then have some dedicated phone buttons, and then down here we have toggles that switch through options in that display right there between the speedometer and the tachometer. Now, these systems work a little bit interestingly with one another. So if I scroll through the info setting right there in that center screen, and then I press it, that gets us actually into the menu system that you see in the center console. And then we would use these toggles down here on the steering wheel to actually switch through options, and then click this middle button to actually set that particular option. And then again, when you're not in that menu, these buttons control that particular display. On this side, we have the controls for the adaptive cruise control system. S and I are the two different modes for the drivetrain. So we have sport, and then we have more of an intelligent or advanced mode right there. We then have a button right here for the heated steering wheel functionality. The interior in the sport trim is a little bit different. We have a small sport tag right there. It looks kind of like a clothing tag. Fabric trim on the doors. Basically the same kind of soft touch materials on the doors and dashboard panels that we see in the other trim we just looked at. And then we get some contrasting stitching on the doors and on the dashboard. Orange is apparently the new sporty, so we see a lot of orange trim going on in this cabin, around the air vents right there, and in the center console, around the shifter, and the new dual mode X drive button and knob arrangement that's right there behind the shifter. When it comes to our performance scores, it's important to remember that we are driving this out here in North Carolina. We're at about 2,200 feet above sea level, and most of our testing is done right at sea level, so keep that in mind. It also is nearly 80 degrees out here, and I have another journalist in the vehicle. In our preliminary 0 to 60 time, this ran from 0 to 60 in 9.9 seconds. I suspect that with all of those factors put together, this should be running about 9.5 to 9.4 seconds once we get this back home and are able to 0 to 60 test it there. That's going to put this right around the same 0 to 60 time as the Chevy Equinox, and definitely a little bit slower than the Nissan Rogue or Honda CR-V. Honda CR-V with the 1.5 liter turbo is pretty quick in this segment, and it will go 0 to 60 in 7.3 seconds. Of course, if you want the fastest entry in this segment, then you will have to pay notably more for that than this Forester here, but you could get something like a V6 Jeep Cherokee, and it would run 0 to 60 down in the 6-second range. We haven't had the chance to 60 to 0 test this vehicle yet, but in our preliminary numbers, I'm going to say this is probably going to be right around 124 to 125 feet, which should be substantially similar to the Honda CR-V, the Toyota RAV4, etc. We have 225 with tires on all versions of the Forester, and the curb weight is overall fairly light for an all-wheel drive vehicle. If you were to get one of the options in this segment that had more of a sporty drive nature in mind, something like the Kia Sportage, it's likely going to stop shorter, 60 miles an hour back to 0, but it will also have wider tires, not be quite as efficient, and not be as high off the ground either. That high ground clearance is important to remember because this is almost 9 inches off the ground. This is significantly higher off the ground than base versions of even Jeep's Cherokee. That's because the Jeep Cherokee has multiple different ride heights. The Cherokee has a very, very capable all-wheel drive system. I would actually say more capable than what we find in the Subaru Forester if you get the right version, because it's the only entry in this segment that has a 2-speed transfer case and a locking rear differential. That model has ground clearance that is very similar to what we're driving right here, but that's not all Jeep Cherokees. The base models and actually the beginning level all-wheel drive systems are actually not as high off the ground as the model that we're driving here. And the average Jeep Cherokee, its all-wheel drive system is just about as capable as what we find in the Subaru Forester. So this is definitely a solid comparison to those vehicles in those mainline and base trims. And this will actually be much better off-road, especially if you're looking for those ground clearance statistics, than that base Cherokee model. Unfortunately, there is a penalty to be paid for that high ground clearance, and that is overall vehicle handling and overall vehicle dynamics. Even though this does feel a little bit tighter, a little bit sharper than the previous generation of the Forester, this is not going to be quite as engaging on your favorite winding mountain road as something like a Hyundai Tucson or the Kia Sportage, or actually even certain versions of the Chevy Equinox either. But those vehicles have a very different mission in mind. They're much closer to the ground. They start as front-wheel drive vehicles. Those vehicles are really targeted at someone that wants the practicality of the hatchback in the rear and the large cargo area, the upright seating position, etc., but they don't necessarily need the off-road ability that we find in the Forester or in the Jeep Cherokee. It's important to remember that there are always trade-offs with any new car design. So because Subaru was really targeting that off-road ability in this vehicle, we do see a slight reduction in the overall on-road handling ability. You'll also see that when it comes to the tire size that we have in this vehicle. Again, we have 225 width tires all the way around. We don't have wider tires, which could help improve on-road handling ability. On the flip side, however, off-road handling ability and a nice, supple ride often go hand in hand together, and that is exactly what we see in this vehicle. This is definitely more softly sprung than something like the Tucson or even actually the Toyota RAV4 as well. I would actually say that in terms of overall suspension tuning dynamics and the quietness and comfortableness of the ride, if that could be a word, rivals the Honda CR-V. The CR-V is a very comfortable entry in this segment, and we also have a very comfortable ride in this model as well. And yes, you heard me right, I did say quiet, because Subaru has done an awful lot of work to make the Forester quieter than before. The last generation Forester was honestly pretty loud out on the road, both in terms of wind noise and in terms of road noise. Both of those metrics have been improved for this generation of the Forester, whether we're driving along broken pavement like on this road right here, or you're driving at higher speeds, it's much better controlled than in the past. Although I have noticed that there is a little bit more wind noise than I expected right around the windows at higher speeds, it's kept fairly well in check, and I'm going to say that this is probably going to get a very similar score in our cabin noise test as the Honda CR-V once we can get this back at home and do our official testing. Fuel economy is unquestionably high in this model. 33 miles per gallon is what this is rated on the highway, 29 combined, and over a day of mixed driving out here in North Carolina with the air conditioning on the whole time, 0 to 60 testing it, and a decent amount of idling, we've still been averaging about 33 miles per gallon. And most people out here that have been driving these cars have been averaging very high fuel economy numbers as well. The continuously variable transmission helps keep the engine at the optimum RPM for efficiency or for performance, depending on exactly what you're asking of it. And the all-wheel drive system that we find in modern Subarus has the ability to disconnect the rear axle and send most of the power up front at higher speeds. That helps improve highway fuel efficiency. Overall, the combination is exactly what you'd expect out of a Subaru crossover. This is a definite refinement over previous generations of the Forester, but they really haven't reinvented the wheel here. This is still the same sort of form factor, the same sort of thing going on that Subaru shoppers are after. So if you like the previous generation Forester, you're going to like this one even more. If the Subaru Forester wasn't exactly your cup of tea, then this version might not be either. If you're looking for something that has better on-road dynamics, you will find that in this segment, but you'll have to give up some of the off-road ability, and you'll also, interestingly enough, have to give up some of the fuel economy. The high fuel economy that we see in this model really is one of the big selling points for the Forester, because this allows you to have all-wheel drive without that fuel economy compromise that we see in most of the competition. So in some ways, this really is a no-compromises crossover in this segment. The average Subaru owner isn't likely to take their Forester rock crawling or serious off-roading like you'd expect a Jeep Wrangler to be able to do, but they do expect their Subaru to be able to accomplish mud roads, gravel roads, anything that a national park in the winter could throw at them. This is the kind of vehicle that's designed to be taken camping. It's also obviously designed for New England winters or Pacific Northwest winters, etc. And that's because the all-wheel drive system that Subaru uses is always sending at least some power to the rear axle, and it helps make this feel a little bit more sure-footed than some other all-wheel drive designs. But as I always remind folks, if you're in a snowy area, remember that tires are very, very important, and they're arguably more important than an all-wheel drive system and how it's designed in a vehicle. Because a front-wheel drive crossover like a Honda CR-V front-wheel drive is going to accelerate better, stop better, and handle better than this vehicle if it were to have summer tires on them or even all-season tires, depending on exactly how cold it is. So always remember that the right tires are going to make a big difference. And if you put snow tires on this vehicle, then you're really going to have good traction in winter weather. As always, you'll have to wait until we can get one of these back at home so we can run it through our usual battery of tests, but I can safely say that if you're shopping in this segment right now, you should definitely put the 2019 Forester on your shopping list. So how much will a Forester set you back? Well, this will start at $24,295, and you should be able to buy one just about as soon as you're watching this video. Subaru tells us that they will be filtering into dealer lots in September. They should definitely have more on the lots in October. As we've seen with other Subaru models like the all-new Subaru Ascent, the base model is a very, very good value in this segment. It's really easy to say that right off the bat. At $24,295, we have that standard EyeSight safety system. standard Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, and most importantly, standard all-wheel drive. Subaru is so dedicated to all-wheel drive that every vehicle that they sell in America except for the BRZ has all-wheel drive standard, and that really helps improve the overall value proposition versus the competition. Because a similarly priced Honda CR-V to this would be the base front-wheel drive model, and the all-wheel drive is going to cost you definitely more than what we're looking at right here. It's actually not going to save you anything when it comes to fuel economy. A lot of people in this segment will say that they buy the two-wheel drive model because it gets better fuel economy than the all-wheel drive version, but for the Subaru there really is no compromise because we get fuel economy that bests most of the front-wheel drive models in this segment, and again we have that standard all-wheel drive system. The next step up from there would be the $26,695 premium package that gets you the panoramic moonroof that we saw in this vehicle, the base X mode system, and an upgraded interior. From there, we move on up to the new $28,795 sport trim that gives us the new dual X mode system. The sport model also gives you a tweaked exterior appearance, tweaked interior appearance. We have some orange accents on the outside and keyless go. The next step up from there is the $30,795 limited package that gets you upgraded LED headlamps, 2-zone automatic climate control instead of single-zone automatic climate control, and the power liftgate. If you'd like your Forester fully loaded, which is what we've been driving today, that'll set you back $34,295 for the touring trim, which gets you the premium upgraded sound system in this cabin, the 8-inch infotainment screen, LED fog lamps, some unique trim pieces on the inside, and the reverse auto brake system. The 2019 Forester is pretty much exactly what you'd expect out of a modern Subaru crossover. We have excellent value in the base model and especially midline trims as well. Even still decent value in this top-end touring trim, although some of the competitor models do come close to this when it comes to overall value and overall features for the dollar. Subaru is also really dedicated to safety. We have their latest active safety systems, standard in all trims, standard LED headlamps. You can get your way on up to these steering LED headlamps, which are some of the best that you can find in the industry. And the touring trim gives us some of the interior trappings that Subaru shoppers have been asking for a while. Now, we still don't see things like ventilated seats on the inside that we will find in some of the competitive models. But we also have features that we don't find in the competitors' models, especially the base trim, like Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. That's something that a lot of other car companies make you step on up to a different model in order to get. We also have standard automatic climate control in the base model, which is another feature that I like, even though it is only a single zone until you work your way on up to the trim ladder to get the dual zone like this particular model has on it. You will, of course, have to wait until we can get our hands on one for a complete week so we can run through our usual battery of comparisons and tests. But I can easily say that if you're shopping in this segment for any of the mainstream entries and you want something that's a little bit more off-road capable, a little bit more rugged, or just simply a better value, definitely put this on your shopping list. Thanks for checking out this video. Be sure and click that subscribe button down there at the bottom of your screen so you can be updated on all of our latest videos, including a full review on the Forester when we can get our hands on one for a week. You can also click up there to the top of your screen to support this channel. Head over to facebook.com/AlexandAutos and you can see what we're driving this week. I'll see you later.